the anti-vaxxers. They are putting at risk their own kids, and they're putting at risk our kids as well. And those people are putting us all at risk. Aaron O'Toole is siding with them instead of with Canadians who did their part and stepped up. Canadians have shown it in being there for each other. And I am not going to back down no matter how many of them show up to try and shout us down. So shame on you, Aaron O'Toole. You need to condemn those people. And that means we're going to work on vaccination certifications, on vaccination passports.
And that we work with the provinces on vaccine certifications.
If you want to get on a plane or a train in the coming months, you're going to have to be fully vaccinated. Now is the time for people who are still resistant to getting vaccinated, that there will be consequences for those people in not being able to go to a gym or a restaurant, not being able to go to a movie theater, not being able to get on a train or a plane.
Our plan is to make sure that anyone on a plane or train is vaccinated, that anyone in the federal public service gets vaccinated.
And we know that the way to get through this as well is to make sure that people can go into non-essential businesses and feel safe that they're not going to get catch COVID from someone next to them.
We all have an opportunity to get back a little more to normal. Except that those people who have not yet chosen to get vaccinated are putting all this at risk.
The risk posed to all of us by unvaccinated people?
Le refus de tempérer à cet ordre vous rend passible d'une amende pouvant aller de 1 000 à 6 000 $.
Not only are they putting at risk our kids who are still too young to get vaccinated. I have a 7-year-old who started in grade 2 just earlier this week. Very excited about it, but he's vulnerable. All of us, even if we did the right things and got vaccinated, are at risk of lockdowns because of future waves of unvaccinated.
Having us risk more lockdowns because they haven't chosen to get vaccinated yet.
Please, everyone, if we can be respectful and we can leave.
Piece of shit! Transphobic piece of shit! Transphobic piece of shit! Transphobic, this is where the line. This is where.
In September, the federal government posted a call for expressions of interest for contractors to supply, provide, and manage quarantine isolation camps throughout every province and every territory in Canada. These quarantine isolation camps, however, are not limited to people with COVID, but provide a wide latitude for many people to be detained. Surely this government is aware of the intentions to build these isolation camps from coast to coast. And my question to the Premier is, how many of these camps will be built? And how many people does this government expect to detain?
My son is supposed to be coming in from the flight from Phoenix, and he is being detained because they didn't accept his test. They're saying it's not accurate, and they are wanting to take him to a quarantine facility. They won't let me talk to him. They won't let me see him. They won't come and talk to me. The board, they say he doesn't have a choice. They say that it's the law. They say that I don't have the right to talk to him, to see him. and they are taking him against my will and his will, and I'm not okay with it, and I don't know what to do about it, and I don't know where I'm supposed to find him. So this quarantine facility apparently is up and running and totally legal, as they say, and I'm freaking out.
Today, we're confirming an additional $23.7 million in federal funding to operate isolation sites in regions such as Toronto, Peel, York, and Durham. And we're finalizing the details for similar sites in Thunder Bay, Windsor, and other regions.
Quebec is planning to force adults that refuse a COVID vaccine to pay what's called a health contribution tax.
Those who refuse to receive their first dose in the coming weeks will have to pay a new health contribution.
We will be putting forward measures to put those tools permanently in place. The authorities of FinTrack, I believe, do need to be expanded to cover crowdsourcing platforms and payment platform and their payment providers.
Mais il y a aussi des gens qui sont farouchement opposés à la vaccination. Qui sont extrémistes. Qui croient pas dans la science, qui sont souvent misogynes, souvent racistes aussi. Et là, il faut faire un choix en tant que leader, en tant que pays. Est-ce qu'on tolère ces gens-là?
So we need to rethink our notion of what terrorism is these days. Is that the point?
Well, I think be more expansive in our definition. I really see two main streams, and one is an emphasis on nationalism, also tied in with a anti-statist or anti-authoritarian perception.
And why would we call it right-wing extremism?
You know, that traditional left-right ideological spectrum, liberalism, conservatism.
A new report that really is a warning about rising online activity by right-wing extremists in Canada.
In Canada, we found that right-wing extremists were more active in 2020 than they were in 2019. The accounts belonging to right-wing extremists were more prevalent and more accessible.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his government's COVID restrictions were a frequent target of those attacks.
Well, I absolutely do think that white supremacist movements are a very real, a very grave threat to Western liberal democracy. I think they are a grave and real threat here in Canada.
The next terrorist killer in Canada is known. We can build the profile. It's a guy. He's white. And he's probably said some shit. He's probably made you feel a little bit uncomfortable with some of his comments. He might have a thing for military paraphernalia or firearms. And we need to snitch on these guys.
You want my life, Jesse Brown? You come and take it. Don't send the millennials after me on your little witch hunt.
The small fringe minority of people who are on their way to Ottawa or who are...
That's why I went to Ottawa. 9 out of 10 stages for genocide present in Canada right now. And apparently, the target of this little witch hunt, the profile of the next terrorist killer in Canada, is just about everybody I know who's ever bled for this country. Are you going to tell me that we weren't met with hatred?
That's a wounded veteran! That's a wounded warrior right there! They're gonna get injuries! Hey, you don't have to hit him push back. Move back. Please.
Are you going to tell me that those cops didn't hate us?
Man being kneed there. It's terrible.
Oh, come on through. Come on through. What is happening here? Wow. Trampling horses. Trampling. Stop it. Stop it. Look. Oh my God.
And that profile of the next terrorist killer? You're going to tell me that's by accident? I'm not so sure. Hey, what's up, troops? It's Jeff Evely, Ops Sgt Major for Veterans for Freedom, back with you now here on the 28th of December, 2022. Just wanted to jump on the live stream here and crank out a few issues for the day. It's as busy a day as it ever is in the battle to restore human rights and fundamental freedoms in Canada and across the globe. So let's dive right into it. Okay, I saw this. This is trending on Twitter right now. It's Pierre Poilievre is broken. I don't know who this guy is, Nikki with an E. But these are the kinds of memes that they're coming after Pierre with right now. So this looks to me like something very childish and an act of desperation at this stage of the game. So it's like there's no content here. I'm not even sure what they're accusing him of. You can see that we've got Pierre, smash, smash, smash on his little Canada box. And now he's got a broken Canada for Christmas presents. And he's saying it's broken because he smashed it, I guess. But what exactly are they accusing him of doing in terms of destroying Canada? That much is unclear. But again, I just wanted to throw this out there because it's so lame that I think it shows how desperate they are at this point. Okay. Okay, this is Dana Metcalf here. She's a close friend of the podcast and V4F, very close ally of ours too. She marched with James in Newfoundland, and she's been kind of helping us out ever since. So she's a really valued member of the team. And Dana says, can someone explain to me how Canadian media is posting get vaccinated for Santa ads, and in Ireland, this is on the front page? So that's a great contrast I think she's making there. And you can see that very much across the board, where places like Norway are banning the vaccine for children under 18, and Trudeau is out there pushing to get the babies vaccinated all the way down to 6 months old. And we saw what that stuff does, the mRNA does to a newborn child in Australia there recently, where the child needed a blood transfusion. And when the parents requested that it be true blood, as in not contain any of that product, they refused. They said they lost the blood that the family had procured through a church member who had donated it. And they went ahead and just stuck that mRNA in the baby anyway, and the baby died. Something like a 1 foot long blood clot that ran from its feet to its head. So, or to their feet to their head. That's pretty sad stuff. So anyway, here's the Irish Light. And it says, Pfizer knew their vaccine would kill. Leaked data shows a shocking number of fatalities and side effects now officially associated with the COVID shots. So this is front page news in Ireland, and that's a good sign. That's a good sign that people are waking up across the pond. In some cases, they faced more draconian measures than we did here, even in Canada. This is a really positive development in Ireland right now, and it really goes to show you just how out of touch we really are, or our leaders really are, or are pretending to be. With respect to what's really going on with these products. Anyway, we'll keep an eye on that. I think that these are really positive signs. I got a few more lined up for you here. But let's see. So here's Tucker, and he's got Glenn Beck on there. Now, when I first started kind of waking up to this idea that, I got lied to in school and I was being lied to by the news, I think that really started happening around 2010. Like, not really around 20. Well, I was already kind of down the rabbit hole with the 9/11 conspiracies and stuff like that for a while. And then I came back out of that rabbit hole and said, okay, so, it wasn't a false flag, but what's really going on? And that's kind of what led me to where I am right now with my boomer shtick. But that took time. And I used to think before I had that experience that Glenn Beck was a crackpot. I mean, I can remember, you gotta love the Americans, because I'm working at the home of air dominance, Tyndall Air Force Base in Florida. That's where the operational center for the continental United States NORAD is. They're actually looking at the air picture for the whole continent and scrambling jets to intercept potential hijackings or terrorist attacks, what have you. It was originally designed, of course, to keep the Russians out, but it's since been adapted to look at the interior of the United States as well. But anyway, I remember going to the headquarters element at one time to, I don't know, fix the general's computer or something like that. That was a really big part of my job down there, as I was kind of the general's IT guy. And so I was going up to the command section, and they have the big screen TVs all over the place. And right there in the lobby, I guess, where all of the admin assistants kind of sit facing each other. You walk into the main lobby in the command section, they've got the 60 or 70 inch flat screen there, and Glenn Beck's on at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And he's got like a George Soros marionette, and he's going, and who's this? It's George Soros. Oh, George Soros, what are you doing here? And I was going, wow, like this guy is really out to lunch. But you know what? It turns out not so much. And that's kind of a funny thing, I guess, of having to go through one of these fourth turnings where the tyranny really creeps in, is all the people that are speaking the truth just sound crazy to everybody who's still kind of plugged into the matrix, So anyway, and Tucker Carlson, I used to think that he was, a really crappy guy or something like that. But you stop and think about it. I'm like, what has he ever done? What has he ever said? What is everybody so angry at him for? Well, it's having the courage to speak the truth. I mean, and I mean that too. I mean, this guy, he had Antifa come to his house and try to break in his door with an axe while his wife was home alone, hiding in the closet, and he's still on the TV reading the news. I think he got back out the next night and did it actually. So hats off to Tucker too for having the courage.
We didn't know anything about this.
Without further ado,
we didn't know anything about this in December. We were starting to get rumblings. China said there was some sort of an outbreak on December 31st. But Dr. Barrick signs a government deal with Moderna. I want to read it exactly to you. This deal was made. It's confidential. It's 158 pages long. It is, if I skip to page 104, they are entering a specific private confidential agreement. The NIH appears to be transferring technology to Dr. Barrick, but what they're making clear is, quote, mRNA coronavirus vaccine candidates developed and jointly owned by NIAID and Moderna. Now, this is weird because it's 2 weeks later that we know there's a problem. They signed that deal 2 weeks before, and they signed it with the doctor who happened to be a partner with the Bat Lady in Wuhan. Here's where it gets really dark. These are the same group of people that in the end of January begin to have meetings, and they shut down and begin to smear anyone who's looking into the lab leak theory. They establish that's not true. Don't even look there. It appears to be collusion. We've passed this on to several people in Congress and the Senate. We know Rand Paul is on this, and Dr. Fauci has some answers to give.
Okay, so again, that's mainstream. This is the kind of thing that we wouldn't have seen even a few months ago on Twitter. And Glenn Beck, as usual, like, he does his homework, man. He's really way down all the rabbit holes, and it all sounds crazy, but
people are really starting to wake up to just kind of how carefully you need to be paying attention to understand what's really happening out there right now. And of course, this is all stuff that many of us knew from the beginning too. But the awakening is going to take time. Okay, but this is really something here. We've actually got, okay, this is Michael W. Doyle. He's saying, Ed Dowd, quote, I'm 100% convinced that the vaccines are killing people, close quote. Quote, at this point, the data is overwhelming, close quote, attested the former BlackRock executive portfolio manager. Quote, and what we have now is the greatest cover-up in history of our nation. Now, could you imagine? This is a former BlackRock guy. So these are heavy hitters coming out and speaking all kinds of truth about what's really going on out there. This is very positive, guys. So let's check them out.
By the way, Ed and I have met in person in Hawaii. When I went to Maui, Ed showed up. I have no idea who he was. He said, I used to work at BlackRock, and he just looked like a Hawaii dude. When I met him, I had no idea. But
the bottom line is this, Josh and I prided ourselves on what we call on Wall Street, being early, being right, and being loud. And I'm 100% convicted that the vaccines are killing people. And at this point, the data is overwhelming. And what we have now is the greatest cover-up in the history of our nation.
Strong words. Very positive sign. Okay, here's Jake Shields. He's a pro UFC fighter. Good one at that. And he says, in China, 90% of the people are vaccinated, 100% are wearing masks. China is having the largest COVID outbreak the world has seen. Trust the science. Okay, so that's kind of what's happening in China right now. I have seen a lot of footage coming out. Now, there's something to consider here. It's the Great Wall of China. So in the early pandemic, when we saw everybody like keeling over in the streets with COVID, was that real, or was that for the purpose of scaring us? The thing is, the Great Firewall of China is just that. It's designed to keep the internet hermetic to China. Like nothing gets out and nothing gets in unless they want it to. And Silicon Valley, of course, is only concerned with getting that sweet commie cash. So Tim, what's his name? The Apple guy there. He actually disabled Apple AirDrop during the recent demonstrations in China there. So it's not hard to tell which way he leans, right? But anyway, they are now having to deal with some of their biggest their biggest outbreaks right now. And here's Donald Trump Jr. He says, so this isn't racist anymore. U.S. to impose new restrictions on travelers from China amid COVID outbreaks. So that's a reference to something that happened very early in the pandemic. Trump had closed the borders to Chinese travelers. We didn't, because that was racist, I guess. Yeah, I mean, that was always a very reasonable restriction to, close off the source of the outbreak to entering the U.S. And, these are temporary measures. It was never the intent to just ban anybody with yellow skin from the United States. So it's all a bunch of hype that the left is engaged in here. Basically, anybody who opposes them, they're the heretic, right? And hate is the new heresy. Like, we're dealing with a theocracy, like I'm always saying. Colloquially known as the wokeness, but by its technical term, it's postmodernism. And yeah, anybody who blasphemes the dogma of the postmodernist theocracy, they just accuse of hate, which is the heresy in the new theocracy. So here's the Hill. They're usually pretty good. They lean right. Here we have U.S. to impose new restrictions on travelers from China amid COVID outbreaks. And it says below the caption here, below the photo, says passengers prepared to board a flight at the airport in north central China's Xinji province on November 1st, 2022. The Chinese government said Tuesday, December 27th, it will start issuing new passports as it dismantles antivirus travel barriers, set up a potential flood of millions of tourists out of China for the next month's Lunar New Year holiday. Okay. The Biden administration is planning new coronavirus precautions on travelers arriving from China due to a surge in COVID-19 cases and concerns about the lack of transparent reporting data from the country, federal health officials said Wednesday. Yeah, you think those concerns might have existed like in the immediate, the initial pandemic there? Yeah, I think they probably existed at that time as well. Beginning on January 5th, all passengers at least 2 years old originating from China will be required to show a negative COVID-19 test no more than 2 days before the departure from China, Hong Kong, or Macau. The requirement will apply to all air passengers regardless of nationality and vaccination status, officials said. They did not say how long the policy will be in place. Airlines must confirm that the COVID-19 test results or documentation of recovery from all passengers before they board. Passengers who tested positive more than 10 days before the flight can provide documentation of recovery from COVID-19 in lieu of negative test results. Passengers flying through Incheon International Airport in Seoul, Toronto, Pearson International Airport, and Vancouver International Airport on their way to the United States will be required to provide a negative COVID-19 test no more than 2 days before their departure to the United States if they've been in China in the last 2 days, officials said. The move aims to decrease the number of infected passengers boarding airplanes and could give public health authorities time to identify and understand any potential new variants that may emerge. Very sensible. The new policy reflects the Biden administration's concern over the situation in China, which is rapidly ending its strict, quote, zero COVID, close quote, policy in the face of protests. So protests are working in China, just not in Canada. What do you know? So that's where we are right now. But you know, I can't overstate the role that ineptitude plays in all of this, okay? So at least they have some semblance of competent leadership somewhere in China that actually hears the concerns of its people, believe it or not. And this is after they've been forcing them to do anal swabs in the street. Like you can see the videos of them, you know, restraining women and bending them over and pulling down their pants so they can swab their anuses with for COVID, which is absurd, of course, because it's a respiratory disease, as in pulmonary, as in it harms the lungs, not the anus, or the blood for that matter. So I saw a pretty good presentation at the Free Speech and Medicine Conference in Quebec, Nova Scotia there a few months ago, where one of the doctors was talking about how, you know, like when you swab somebody's nasal cavity and find that there's COVID there, but they don't have symptoms, that basically tells you their immune system is working, okay? Like mucus is exactly for that purpose. It traps pathogens before they get into the lungs where they can do harm. And vaccinating the blood would, you know, protect against pathogens that might harm the blood or other parts of the body, but not the lungs. So it's airborne, it goes into the lungs before it gets to the blood. If it gets on your skin, like it's not going to hurt you. You know, your immune system is going to work there because your skin is part of the immune system. It's when it gets into the lungs that it wreaks havoc. So anyway, yeah, I mean, it's really something, I think, to see China backing off from its strict COVID policy while we still languish over here in communist Canada. But I digress. But the Chinese government has virtually stopped reporting any outbreak data, and Biden administration health officials said they were concerned about potential new variants circulating without their knowledge. Officials said they did not know the true infection rate or number of deaths and hospitalizations in China. I don't think that's ever been known. Officials said the United States has offered the Chinese government vaccines as well as other support for COVID-19, but has been rebuffed. This story was updated. Okay, so that's good. So they've been rebuffed. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that China is not using mRNA, especially not on its military, I don't think. So I'm not surprised that they are rebuffing the United States on their offer for mRNA vaccines. Okay, so here's another one from China. And of course, I can't tell what any of this says. What are these called? I forget what the writing is called. I guess it's Mandarin, but okay, so here's what's going on. Okay, so there you have it. There's the communist utopia in action. Yeah, this is the problem. You can't trust humans with power over other humans, and this kind of central planning that consolidates all the decision-making power within a small body of people like this that are in the echo chamber and completely out of touch with the kind of challenges that everyday people face in their regular lives. And yeah, they're just destroying the lower class, right? I mean, whatever their lower class is, it's an oligarchy. It's not true communism, of course. But yeah, I mean, it is those at the lower rungs of society who are the most harmed by these policies, and it is having an impact on China. Clearly, the Chinese people, they're rising up, and I want to remind everybody, as I always do, about the fourth turning view on this thing, the Strauss-Howe generational theory take. I'm looking at China right now, and yeah, I can't help but think that that's Gen X that's leading that revolution over there, especially when you consider the fact that they would have been the kids of Tiananmen Square. So whatever cultural knowledge of what really happened there, as opposed to what the propaganda says about what happened there, that knowledge would reside in that generation, right? It would reside in the Chinese Generation X. So yeah, I think that gives us all kinds of room for optimism. If we see signs that China is waking up, they've had, of course, a full saeculum now, a full human lifetime of Chinese communism. So they're very deeply indoctrinated. We could expect a very deep level of indoctrination. Of Orwellian proportions, in fact, where their minds are stifled in a prison of their own fear, because that's how it works in an authoritarian culture, which I relate to my experience in the military. You know, and the boss is always right, okay? And if you question the boss, well, there must be something wrong with you. And that was also a component of Stalinism. That we saw, they would send them to psych wards. You know, if they had a problem with communism, then they would ship them off to the psych ward. And now in Canada, we see that the medical establishment in Ontario, anyway, provided recommendations to physicians that they consider providing psychiatric medication to people who refuse the vaccine. So. Yeah, I mean, all of those same elements captured in those dystopian novels are present. And it's important to remember that those novels are exaggerations. You know, they're sort of, they're the vision of what things would be like in the case of 1984 if current trends from 1930s Europe continued. As far as our Orwell was concerned, like if you just follow that to its conclusion over the course of the next 50 years, because that's what 1984 was, it was 50 years hence. He originally wrote it in 1930, didn't publish it until 1934, so it was supposed to be 1980, and it turned out to be 1984. But of course, those trends didn't hold. After the war, things changed because there was a new leadership in place, right? And it was that generational change that made the difference. I've said this in the program before. You know, it was the change from the missionary generation to the lost generation. The lost generation was the generation of troops in the First World War and the generation that led on the battlefields of the Second World War that eventually overtook the generalship and the presidency. It was the changing from FDR to Truman, from missionary to lost, that made the difference. And it was Truman who fired all those old-timer generals and put the competent guys in there. The thing about the missionary generation is they would have been the generation that was born in the wake of the American Civil War. Okay, so and that's what the theory posits, is that it's always the generation that's born in the wake of the previous great crisis. In this case, the Second World War and the boomer generation, that leads us to total war in their early elderhood when they're at peak institutional power. But enough of that review. Warren Little is saying, Folks awakening are justly angry, but we must remember reacting in anger is counterproductive. In The Art of War, it states, quote, if they are violent and easily angered, then use embarrassment to enrage them so that their morale is upset. They will, is it morale or moral is upset? Then they will proceed carelessly without formulating a plan. That's true. That is why the overt gaslighting to paint us as villains, to the naive youth being indoctrinated in public schools to vilify those who can, quote, see the government's deception. This is the battle for, and the comment ends there from my perspective. But yeah, good points, Warren. I like that people are looking at The Art of War. It's a very important book. I think it's very relevant right now. And also I would recommend Newt Gingrich's Trump versus China. He does a really good job of putting that Art of War lens over, current policy. And there's a lot in there about how the Chinese always learn from their adversaries. They study us, and they're following a colonization model now. But on the gaslighting and the embarrassment, yeah, that's the ticket here, folks. That's the way through this thing. Is they're playing the emotional game, right? That's how propaganda works. It manipulates your emotions, and that's what I mean when I say in an authoritarian culture, their minds are stifled. They're atrophied in the prison of their own fear, because as Orwell demonstrates, it basically gets to the point where they're so gaslit that they won't even allow themselves to think critically of the regime. That's demonstrative of what I think is the religious impulse's role in this as well, because all these authoritarian regimes, communism and the like, they really are just kind of cults. They're political cults, and they put nothing above the state, whereas religions do put, God above the state. And that's why China has to oppress Uyghurs and Muslims, because they are threats to the regime. They are not indoctrinated into the one true faith, and so now they're re-educating Uyghurs and stuff like that, and they're indoctrination camps to basically change their religion. Okay, so moving on. Okay, here's another one in those idiot Chinese letters or something like that. And it says, migrants demolish Paris. The city is in complete chaos. Kurds and Moroccans are expressing their dissatisfaction with French migration policy. So I'm not sure what the messaging is on the migration policy or what their beef is. But this was all kind of very much foreseeable. This is the fallout of the migrant crisis after Gaddafi was taken out in Libya by the Clinton-Obama machine. And that sparked the migrant crisis. And, I remember during that time, the Saudis were asked to take people in because, well, I mean, they're a pretty obvious choice. Turkey, Saudi, those are other Muslim countries. There's a lot more cultural overlap with them and some of these even African countries than they would find in the West, and they would probably integrate better and be more comfortable. But the Saudis said that the million or so air-conditioned tents that they have out there in the middle of the desert are strictly for people on the Hajj. So when you do the pilgrimage to Mecca, you can stay in these tents for free. But if you're migrants, then we're not willing to repurpose these tents for that purpose. And the reason stated was because they were, I can't remember the term that they use now, but it's lower caste. That's what it means. It means they're lower caste than the people in Saudi. And if we were to bring those lower caste people in here, that would not be good for us. And the West is sitting over here like, yeah, we know, but sure, we'll take the lion's share. And that's what they did. Yeah, I mean, it's not a winning strategy in my view. It's just not. It's like I say, like the West and Canada, these are essentially life rafts in a bloody sea of chaos and tyranny the world over. And what we see is kind of the sea coming into the life raft here. And instead of what we should be doing, which is throwing them a life preserver. And like we complained for years in in Canada about the brain drain. I remember that all through the 90s. It was all about the brain drain and how all of our educated professionals are leaving for greener pastures in the United States and higher salaries. And we spend all this time educating them and all this investment into them, and now they're gone. And how do we fight the brain drain? And so we decided that the way to do that was to manage immigration in a way that brought desirables into Canada at that time. They were like professionals and stuff like that. They wanted people to be qualified. And, you know, that's all good for us. But the other end of that is it's not so good for the countries over there. It's a brain drain for them. And what they really need is, you know, more Elon Musks. So it's not going to happen overnight either. I mean, it's going to take years, generations of education and proper nourishment in an awful lot of places. Like, we're trying to raise Abel here, and the 80% of the world is still raising Cain. So this is a civilizational project that takes place over secula after secula after secula, like a human lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. It's not reasonable to expect that we're going to see this project to its completion within our own lifetimes. But that seems to be the attitude out there today with the elites. So here we go with the video, give you an idea. And as you can see, it's just mayhem. It's just vandalism. Like, these guys, this is like a little retaining wall around this little green space under a light pole. It's, you know, so like what their beef is with landscaping is anybody's guess, but well, that's just it. I mean, they just want to destroy. That's all. So there you have it. Total mayhem in Paris. And, you know, I still think, I mean, I'm looking at the Church of Notre Dame and the fire there, and I'm thinking that was arson. They said it was welding equipment. I don't believe them. What the hell are they doing welding a roof, you know, a wooden roof that's been there since the 14th century or something? You know, and there's no wood like that anymore. You know, those trees are gone. Everything is new growth now. And the thing about old wood, if you can find some old 2x4, man, that's the stuff to use, because old wood is a lot more dense. You know, it's quite valuable. I think that was a very valuable roof, and they burned it. Well, I think it was arson, because there was a whole slew of churches burning over there in Paris for a long time. And you know, women can't go into coffee shops in the suburbs because they're not welcomed by the Muslim men who frequent them there. And, you know, I'm not, of course, you got to say it's not all Muslims are like that. And I always point to Majid Nawaz, Ayan Hirsi Ali, the reformers out there. From what I can see, the Muslim religion, I agree with Majid Nawaz. It's in need of something like a Lutheran Reformation. And of course, I'll point out that Luther was a nomad, as in Gen X. And Majid Nawaz is also a Gen Xer, a very smart guy, brave man, and you know, you should check him out. He's quite courageous. He's been calling this a global palace coup that's going on right now. So Patricia is asking me if I'm going to Winnipeg. I'm not. I don't have any plans to go to Winnipeg. I think this is in reference to a new convoy. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure people are kind of wondering what I'm thinking about all that. And I have said previously, I think on maybe an interview or something, but I don't think that it's a good strategy at this point, guys. I mean, we all loved the convoy, but it was a one-off thing. We're not going to be able to pull it off again, not in my view. And we saw the way they behaved. It was a totally organic protest. It was people were lining the highways and the overpasses all over the country. And the weekend that the truckers arrived there, they were already discussing the Emergency Act invocation. So they were always going to false flag us. I was saying that as soon as I arrived. I was saying that to people. Like I would hear people saying at press conferences and stuff, you know, this is not our January 6th. We are not the Americans and blah, blah, blah. January 6th was a false flag, guys. There's not a single person that got arrested there who was charged with insurrection or sedition or anything like that. They were all charged with trespassing. They reported that one of the guards, one of the Capitol Police, was murdered on that day. It turned out he died of a heart attack like 2 days later, probably because he was jabbed. But they said that he was bludgeoned with a fire extinguisher during the event. But no, the only person who died was one of the protesters. Damn, and I know her name. And she was a 14-year Air Force veteran, shot in the neck, climbing through a broken window. Like Antifa hasn't done any worse than that. But anyway, when it comes to the convoys, the establishment has adjusted. Like they passed new laws and everything. And they're doubling down on everything too. Like I think if we start convoying again, they're going to get ahead of the game this time. I think they were already doing this the last time, but they're going to do it better this time. And what they're going to do is they're going to have a few plants in the convoy as it rolls through, as it gets started, before it even gets started. And some of the people organizing it now might be confidential informants. Who knows? I don't know. I don't have any details on that. But if I were one of these authoritarian thugs and looking at another convoy coming to any kind of a major city, especially Ottawa, I would be looking for a way to put somebody in that movement to say some nasty things kind of here and kind of there on their social media feed, and then bury all that with a whole bunch of stuff about the convoy so it never really gets picked up. Maybe get them on video saying some very questionable things. And so then they can use that in the media to kind of smear the whole project and, clamp down and crack down. The last time, I think they were just kind of counting on one of those truckers having a firearm or somebody having something, some kind of a weapon, or that we would fight back. And I'll go back to the previous comment about not fighting back and stuff like that. Yeah, guys, take the beating. I mean it. Just take the beating. That's the strategy that works. If the light of history is to be any kind of a guide, I mean, that was what Jesus did. He was like, no, I'm going to show the millennials exactly what the boomers really are. That's the corrupt Sanhedrin is in his case. And it was according to Mel Gibson, it was the Sanhedrin that called for the crucifixion initially, although it was the Romans that did it. But yeah, I mean, that was the idea. He was saying these people are claiming to be virtuous and benevolent when in fact they're ruthless and brutal. And that's what he did, is he just kind of showed everybody what they were really like. So yeah, and Petrus is now saying, I had a dream today of Yellow Jackets ambushing people as they came in. No, the Yellow Jackets are not the bad guy either, but they did the same thing with them. They smeared the hell out of them before they ever even got to Ottawa. So they got their whole bag of smears already ready to go. And now that the narrative is falling apart, I'm willing to bet that they're going to go a step further this time and make sure they really get the job done and they get themselves some real political prisoners. Well, I mean, not that we didn't have that, but down in the United States, I mean, people are still being held on trespassing charges for January 6th. And my understanding is that they are not being held in humane conditions either. So I don't want to see that happen in Canada. I really think that we have a different situation here in terms of, we've got our we've got the inquiry into the EMA, and I know everybody's going to say, oh yeah, well, we'll see what comes out of that. Yeah, I mean, I share your cynicism. I think that that's important, but it's also important to not be black-pilled about it. This is an information finding expedition. There aren't going to be any charges or anything like that. It's not a trial, but this is where the evidence to conduct the trials comes from. So, just be patient with that. And I'm not saying don't engage, stay engaged politically, but I think it's going to be more in terms of, engaging in the lawfare, submitting the charter challenges, the human rights claims, taking people to court, taking the human rights commissions to court, and those kinds of things. And all those processes have teeth. We already woke people up with the original convoy, and we've been capitalizing on that momentum ever since. So I think the important thing, the proper strategy here is to continue to capitalize, and to beat them at some of their own games here with the lawfare and with the politics and so on and so forth, with the culture war. Okay, and standing up to the culture war, I advocate for stoicism, radical candor. Don't ever go on the back foot when they start calling you names and telling you you're this and you're that and you're a bad person. Don't start defending yourself. You go on the attack. You go back at them with exactly what you think of them and what awful people they are. And you don't have to be abusive. Don't be abusive. Do it with some class, and just speak the truth as plainly, as bluntly as you can, and it'll hit them. It really it's a disarming tactic. Radical candor. It's a tactic the ancient Stoics endorse. I mean, our ancestors had this figured out a long time ago, guys. And we got to get back to who we are as a people and get back to our roots in that regard. Okay. And Patricia's pointing out that the special committee for the inquiry has stopped because they voted to stop it. We won't even see what Rouleau has to say now. So I heard that they're going to do it. There's the next stage is going to be to a camera, and so not live, not open to the public, but a matter of public records. But we're not allowed to know what the threat to the continued existence of the country was that necessitated the invocation of the Emergencies Act. So, and obviously there was none. They just did it, right? Because it's what they wanted to do. So, moving on, that was Paris. Now, Tommy Robinson was trending today, and I think that that's a very positive thing. Tommy is just kind of a bloke from Luton in England. I think he's a plumber by trade. He's a business owner. He's Gen Xer. He's a little rough around the edges. These are not his real teeth. He had his teeth smashed out while he was in jail on some of these trumped up charges. They put him in a room, according to him, with 3 other Muslim guys, and they put the slippers to him before a guard could ever get to him. It was all a big setup, apparently, well, according to Tommy. And Tommy's claim to fame was he was the guy who started calling out the pedo rings in England, namely the Muslim rape gangs, which the media reported as Asian rape gangs because they were Pakistani. But it wasn't the case that, it was Orientals doing this. So that was misleading, and deliberately so, to hide the truth of what's really going on. And that is a problem, a widespread problem in the Muslim world. And they tend to view non-Muslims as fair game. I can remember reading about this court case in Australia where, a migrant had raped a girl. And at the conclusion of the trial, the judge was giving him his sentence and giving him kind of the talking to. And the guy was like, yeah, I mean, I just didn't understand what kind of culture shock I was really in for here. I mean, she wasn't wearing a hijab and she wasn't Muslim. So she wasn't a family member, he said. I thought she was fair game. Like he openly said that in court. That's what's out there in the world, guys. That is what's out there in other parts of the world. And that's why the veterans are so agitated at this particular moment, because we see all the same kind of harbingers, cultural markers of tyranny that we see, the attitudes that we see elsewhere. So, and this is kind of where it leads. It leads to exploitation, okay? So this is Tommy. He's the guy who has been absolutely raked over the coals over there in England. He has been in and out of court for years now. And it's all about standing up to the corruption. That's all he's ever done is speak words I think he's been in a few fights and stuff like that, but he doesn't start them. So Tommy's a solid guy and absolutely courageous, and just got back on Twitter. He doesn't even have his original account restored yet. But this is a very big development, I think, to see this guy on Twitter now.
So, I'm fed up of waiting. I've been waiting since 2017 to be given my voice back on Twitter. Elon Musk takes over, everyone's getting their voices back. I still haven't got mine back. I was deleted for giving stats, statistics, facts, as a journalist reporting. Deleted, cancelled, made invisible for that reason. For the same reason the Twitter files are now showing people were made invisible or blanked or censored to do with COVID, with their agenda and their narrative. Mine was the same. I was the test case. I still haven't got my account back. So right now, this is my Twitter account. But please, Elon, give me back my voice. I had nearly 500,000 followers on there. Dedicated followers, and I was dedicated to the job I was doing in enlightening the British public of the stories that no one else wants to. I've faced many problems that have come from that, and I continue to do it. So please, give me back my voice, Elon. So,
I second that, Elon. Tommy Robinson, he's a good man. He's a very courageous man. Geez, he has had the shit kicked out of him, legally and physically, just trying to stand up for the girls in his neighborhood. So now this is a little bit more on the pedo side of things. I didn't put my banner up. Look at me. So that's not even the right one. I changed it. All right, so we'll skip that. But this is another really positive development that I'm seeing. There's a lot of pushback out there coming from the grassroots with respect to Drag Queen Story Hour. So this is Beefcake Floyd, and he says, last night in Knoxville, Tennessee, hood Christian folks stood up against tyranny of pedophiles. So I think what he means by hood Christian folks is either they're wearing hoods or they're from the hood. But I think it's a grassroots thing is what he's saying here. So people in the neighborhoods, they came out to show their contempt for this grooming activity. And we'll just back that up for you guys. Oh, sorry, I put somebody up there, but let's see. Sky says, it isn't a convoy. Check out Ron Serena's post and find out what it's all about. Ron Clock, advocate for Serena. Freedom Bear, not a convoy. Okay, so I got those confused. There is a convoy 2.0 that people are talking about. And I guess, maybe I better check out what's going on in Winnipeg. At any rate, I am kind of sticking close to home right now, so I would need a pretty damn good reason to go all the way to Winnipeg from Atlantic, Canada. I'm always open to speaking engagements and stuff like that, but I'm pretty concerned about anything with the word convoy in it at this point. I just think it's asking for trouble. And there are plenty of other tools in our tool bag that that we can avail ourselves of. Okay, so, and Patricia is saying, these little ones. Okay, that's what she's saying. There is really a good pedo documentary called These Little Ones, explaining how CPS is highly involved. That's Child Protective Services is highly involved. It's not for children, so please watch it away from kids. And I would endorse that practice as well. I embrace the harsh truth. I've just done that since I was a teenager. It's something I read in Carl Sagan book, a little mantra I got from the great Carl. And I will watch beheading videos, suicide bomber manifestos. And, if you're on deployment with me, if you're a young person on deployment with me overseas, I would probably make you watch a beheading video just to make sure you don't get any ideas about going down to the market by yourself. There was a case there not just a few years ago, it might have been 2018, 2017, a couple of Swedish girls, blondes, which are a rare delicacy in a lot of countries. They were backpacking in Morocco, and they got gang raped and beheaded, and it was on video and posted online. And, it was just a really gruesome thing to watch, really gross, squeamish, if it's not for the squeamish. But I want to know exactly what it is that I'm talking about. I don't want to listen to somebody else's opinion about what it is that's happening. I want to see what it is for myself. And I think that's an important exercise for anybody who wants to kind of, put themselves out there, I guess, as some kind of a leader, or anybody who knows anything that they're talking about. You have to do that kind of thing. You really have to get into the nittier-grittier details, and it's going to be uncomfortable, right? But that's important. It's important to make yourself uncomfortable and to test yourself, face challenges, all that stuff. It can be a very valuable exercise if you treat it properly as a means of kind of fortifying your intellectual defenses and being stronger in terms of mentally and preparing yourself. Like, it's kind of a stoic practice, right? It's called the negative meditation in Stoicism, where basically you consider the worst to prepare for the worst. And so if you've already kind of prepared for these challenging situations and these incredible things that can be very emotionally traumatizing if you ever have to find yourself dealing with such a situation, well, at least you've done some preparation, right? And you will be better off having done some than none. So I definitely endorse, that practice of properly educating yourselves by apprising yourself of the actual events and not just the reporting on them. So now here's another one. This is from Australia now. I think this is in Britain. So it says, shut down pedos, closing down drag queen pedophile hour in Australia. Yeah, it's Australia. Okay, so these guys, I don't know who they are. I didn't do any research into it. I'm not endorsing any particular group here. I'm just pointing out that this seems to be a trend that is appearing all over the West, and it's on Twitter now. This is not the kind of thing that we would have seen even a few months ago. So here they are.
You're probably wondering what we're doing here. We came today because we heard there was a drag queen story hour. The person that is presenting their drag queen story out to you, their name is Bilal Bazaar. That translated in Hebrew, it's a Jewish word for demon. There is a transcendent agenda. It is pushing through the schools and is grooming and ballooning our children. And we've had enough. And everyday Aussies are sick to death. They're sick of the transgender shit in the schools. They're sick of the white guilt. They're sick of this pedophile agenda, grooming our youth that are vulnerable. The next time you hear a politician talk about this is what our forefathers fought and died for, the next time you hear a politician talk about the Anzacs, talk about Dakota or the Somme, when you hear about what we're fighting for, all of our freedoms, realize it's for fucking sodomites to groom children. That's what the politicians are talking about. The right for fucking sodomites to groom kids. But for now, you'll continue coming to work. You'll continue working your 9 to 5, your shift, thinking everything's going to be all right. But every year, it rots. It gets worse and worse. And this shit becomes more and more normalized. And we've had enough. The future of our people is non-negotiable. Hail victory, you sodomite faggot! Why does the audience have to be kids? Ask yourself. Why do you protect the pedophilic agenda? What the fuck is wrong with you? Kids don't need to know about pronouns. They don't need to know how to masturbate. They don't need to be around fucking pedos. We're here to protect the children, and you are standing opposite us. What does that say about you? state-mandated homosexuality.
Okay, so like I said, that's not a group that I endorse or anything like that. And they're going to say that they're giving the Sieg Heil there, and that's what it appears to be. It's called the Roman salute. That's where it comes from. So I don't know. I mean, it could be the case that they're not actually Nazis, but it's sure not a good look for you guys. Like I said, I don't know who they are. But this is the kind of thing that does happen when you create desperation in a society, okay? This is what insurgencies are all about. The fact of the matter is that the U.S. invasion of Iraq was botched, and the only mistake was not driving all the way to Baghdad the first time, and the so-called first Gulf War, which wasn't the first, and there wasn't a second. It was the same damn mandate from the UN. So they should have gone in like no half measures. And that was kind of the practice of appeasement that Bush 1 engaged in, mostly, and I'm going to say in response to boomer economic dominance that has been, especially according to, say, Bruce Cannon Gibney in his book, A Generation of Sociopaths, How the Boomers Betrayed America. He talks a lot about how they've used their economic dominance in the United States to fleece them, basically, and fund all their entitlement programs while they don't pay for the wars that they send young people off on for the purpose of securing oil, So there's that. So, but the thing is that in the insurgency, what happened, especially after the troop surge in 2003, colloquially known as Gulf War II, they engaged in what Naomi Klein calls disaster capitalism. She's a Canadian author. The book is called Shock Doctrine, which fails to prove its central thesis that the CIA has anything to do with disaster capitalism or any direct connection to it. But it is this kind of thing that has cropped up, I agree, in the last few decades where, and some of it is very good. I mean, storm chasers are a really good form of disaster capitalism. You just have a bunch of linemen and electrical workers that, they have their trucks on standby and they just kind of go chasing after disasters because that's where the money is. And that's capitalism working in action. It's basically Uber for disasters. But when, but there are times when it's not so good. Like there was a lot that went on during the Chilean revolution with General Pinochet, and he was backed by Ford Motor Company and other American CIA, American companies, things like that. So all a very bad way to implement, a free market democracy in Chile, but that's what they have now. Anyway, the thing is that in Iraq, they went in there with this disaster capitalism. They had it was absolutely replete with like nepotism and they had, I read in one place in that book that there was somebody's daughter who just finished university running the traffic plan for the entire city of Baghdad. Now that's 5 million people. That's a huge city. It's very densely populated. There's all kinds of traffic. And the next thing you know, they have like blackouts, and they disbanded the entire public service because they were Baathists, but you had to be a Baathist to get into the public service. So, that was a little bit too blanket for the people there. They fired the whole government, put an American government in place, a for-profit American government in place, and they couldn't even run the traffic for Baghdad. They couldn't keep the power on. And the next thing you know, you have insurgencies coming up to just to guide traffic in the intersections, and that gains a lot of public support. Okay, so what they're doing here is they're creating desperation because there's a kind of power vacuum, right? There's no the people in charge are not doing their jobs in terms of protecting the young, protecting the vulnerable, and so now you see kind of everyday people who may or may not be the benevolent types, forming these groups that are going to take matters into their own hands at some point. I would speculate that at some point this will not end well. At least it has that potential. You know what I mean? So this is the kind of tension that is building between regular folks and the establishment and the states. And it doesn't lead anywhere good. I mean, look to Iraq if you want to know where that kind of thing goes, where the people in charge are failing to address the needs of their constituents and properly protect people. So anyway, that's again an interesting development, the kind of thing that you're not going to see on Twitter just even a few years ago. There are some good elements of it and some concerning elements about it. Oh, did I reach the end of my show here? I think that may have been my last video there, guys. And I'm back to my own homepage. So yeah, you can go ahead and check me out on Twitter. I'm the magnanimous Gen Xer male, at Jeff Evely, if you want to hit me up on there. And you know, I don't mind a few of the trolls coming at me in the comments, but if you really want to have some fun, this is where you should be finding me. Okay, I'll throw to just a couple of comments here before I sign off. I hope you guys found that to be informative and whatnot. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of room for optimism right now. There's so much information that's coming out. It's coming from all levels. We see the grassroots stepping into the vacuum to try and bring some safety back to our society. But of course, that has a very dark risk element to it as well. Like especially when they're going after the kids. Like there are two things that people will kill for. Number one is their children, their families, the people they love, and number two is their beliefs. So right now, you know, everything is under attack. It's basically all of the beliefs that typical Westerners hold near and dear, and they're going after the kids, and they're going after our health, our food, our energy, you know, all of the things that we need to keep us safe and to thrive. So, like I said, that is the war, and the pedo component of it, I think, is a component of authoritarianism. That is the default setting on the human species. It's the exploitation of our fellow humans, where we exploit the hell out of each other. And it takes, you know, the proper rearing of children and development of people over the course of their young lives to make them good, productive people who have any hope of leaving something better for the next generation. So a couple of comments. Yeah, guys, you know what? I should look into Winnipeg. Maybe that one's kind of flying under my radar. So thanks for bringing that to my attention, and I'll start looking into it a little bit more. So Patricia's saying she doesn't need Twitter. Never got into it. You know what? I never got into it either. All the time I was in the military, I couldn't be politically active. I stuck to Facebook. I still talk politics, but I stayed away from Canadian politics and from military subjects. Because that's what the rules say in the military. So, you know, basically American politics was my pro wrestling for a little while there, for quite a while. I was on the Trump train pretty loud and proud. And, you know, I got all my kicks kind of fighting with my friends on Facebook instead of being engaged with the political class on Twitter, because that's really what it's kind of about, is the blue checks and stuff like that. But it's time to step into that ideological battle space, and I think that's where a good portion of it is going to be taking place, is on Twitter. So I'm there, and let's see, what else we got here. So okay, I'm throwing a lot to Patricia tonight apparently, but it says, thanks for going there, Jeff. It's so important people are informed about the system and how it works. Thanks so much. You guys are welcome. Thanks for tuning in. And, you know, I'm going to be trying to crank these things out every day now, especially coming into the new year. It's a bit of a New Year's resolution of mine. We've just been kind of organically pulling this stuff together, fitting it in around our lives. And in my case, you know, I'm not even really fully transitioned out of the military. You know, almost a year and a half later, I still have claims to file, and I'm still fighting grievances and all kinds of stuff. But we're starting to find a battle rhythm here, and lots of exciting developments on the horizon for the new year. So, guys, thanks again for staying with me. And oh, here's another one here. Warren has a comment. He says, insurgents trained by Wahhabism from Saudi Arabia. which is why bin Laden was a former CIA asset at the time. Our intelligence agencies were compromised. Yeah, it's a very complex story to try to unravel, really, what's going on there. Bin Laden was a CIA asset, but not when he orchestrated 9/11. I don't think that was the case. I think that he went rogue. These guys, like, they will collaborate with us insofar as it aids them in their competition with us. And that, again, is the default setting on the human species. We don't collaborate very well naturally. We really are ultimately just kind of in it for ourselves in nature. And so with Wahhabism, now they've put, last time I checked, it was 80 billion into international charity, into jihadism for the sake of Wahhabism. In the world, it's probably closer to like 100 billion now. I'm starting to see maybe there are some changes even in Saudi where there are these kinds of rumblings of, maybe this hard proselytization of Wahhabism was not the way to go, because they're starting to see a lot of extremism there. But it's complex because, he's a Saudi royal, essentially. He is, what is he? A civil engineer by training. His successor is, oh, I know his name, is an eye surgeon. That's a myth that a lot of people like to perpetrate out there, is that this has a lot to do with lack of economic opportunity, the terrorism itself, jihadism, but that's not the case. It's terrorism, which is political, and political activity is predominantly an occupation of the middle to upper class. So, 16 out of the 19 hijackers of 9/11 had university degrees, so on and so forth. So you have this Saudi royal who's got lots of money, and he decided that he hates America because of the U.S. military base that was established over there in Saudi Arabia. And the fact of the matter is that Muhammad ordered all of the infidels out of the Arabian Peninsula before his death. It's really only supposed to be the Muslims there in Saudi Arabia, but there are a lot of there's been some opening up, like a kind of glasnost in Saudi Arabia, where they have a lot of Africans and a lot of Westerners coming in for the purposes of building industry, and that is blasphemous in the eyes of a hardcore jihadi like bin Laden. So he traveled to Afghanistan, where he had plenty of peasants to prey on and turn into cannon fodder. And we got Al Qaeda out of that. And I know that seems like a bit of a misstep too, but I think the CIA in that case were just trying to help the people that were there defend themselves from a Russian invasion. And I'll remind everybody that Rambo was a jihadi. Like he was a mujahideen. He was playing the football game, polo, with the dead dog on the horses with the mujahideen. So it's a very complex relationship that we have there. You got to go to war with the army that you have. It's one of those things. You don't get to go to war with the army that you want. You got to go with the army that you have. And there's been so much backlash over American foreign interventionism and nation building that they try to help people overthrow their oppressive governments more often now than just go in there and topple dictators, which again, I'm not entirely sure is the best approach. Maybe we should just kind of go ahead and knock these guys out of there. Oh, and the Taliban is also a Pashtun movement, more so than anything. And this is something that I probably should have mentioned earlier in the podcast about these market dominant minorities, and what happens in countries where you have market dominant minorities is you end up with it's fertile ground for sowing the seeds of discontent and Marxism in particular. But in this case, like the Mujahideen and the Taliban, they're not Marxists. The impulse for envy is very strong in humans, and that's what Marxism is so good at playing on. It really appeals to that particular dark angel of our nature, and so does any situation where you're ruled by people that you don't even relate to, like some foreign or some cosmopolitan elite. And that's how the Pashtuns really saw Kabul in the north of Afghanistan, where the Pashtuns are in Kandahar in the south, predominantly in the mountains that form the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan. But it was Pakistan that radicalized the Pashtuns, and they indoctrinated them into a radical Islamist faith in the madrasas of Pakistan. So that was really the animal that made that monster. It was Pakistan, not so much the Americans. And their whole beef is really that they've been there forever. They're indigenous to the mountains. They're mountain people, and they don't really have much of a say in their own politics because that's handled in the north in Kabul, and they tend to be the kind of cosmopolitan elite types, whereas the Taliban, the Pashtuns, tend to be a lot more rural. So over there, more rural. Look anywhere in the world, roll the clock back a couple of hundred years, look anywhere in the world. When you look at mountain people, they are relatively backward compared to, most other folks. And that's just kind of the stage of their development right now in Afghanistan. It's not the case that in the West, you're going to find nearly as many sort of backwoods hillbillies and backward types, but they do exist. That's what Deliverance was all about, and that's what you see. That's what you see in those backward types. The mountain folks is a lot of pederasty, that's it's in boy rape and anal rape, as we saw in Deliverance. There's something about that, about the domination. Even dogs do it. About the domination of the outsider, the other male. So anyway, that's a little bit of a ramble to close things off, but I'm always doing my best to really explain these things right down to the root causes. These are pretty complex subjects, and it kind of takes me a while to articulate it properly. But Warren Little says, Bush laughed at the quote, WMDs. It was designed to usher in the Patriot Act, Marxism, a mind control tool used to destabilize. It's what's done in the Bolshevik Revolution that led to the destruction of the Soviet Union and the establishment of Kazakhstan. Russia had millions of Muslims. Most are unaware. Yeah, that is true. They did have millions of Muslims, not so much anymore. But they do still have Christianity. So I think that has served as a bit of a counterweight to the Marxist faith. And even and there was Glasnost, the Orwellian fate of the Soviets never really came to fruition. It kind of fell apart there in the 90s with the crumbling of the wall, and there's been, like I said, Glasnost and stuff like that. So there has been a little bit of modernization, moving away from the authoritarian approach in Russia, believe it or not, but it's still very, very autocratic. I hope they do better in the future. And anyway, yeah, but that is a thing is like I said, authoritarian regimes will sort of oppress religions because they compete for territory in the ideological battle space with them. So anyway, that's enough out of me for now, guys. Without any more rambling or rants here, I'll say stay frosty and stay safe.